say good day, comment, leave a reply, heckle, do whatever you must to let us know that you can hear us. This is the first time we are going live for the Pearl Live webinar, but also doubling up with the Australian Finance Podcast Weekly Q&A. And we've got a very special topic today and a very special co-host on the airwaves with me, which is Gemma Mitchell. Gemma, how are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I am very, very good. Now, I can see Adrian has asked a question. When are we starting? Hopefully, Adrian, you can hear us. Lauren commented earlier, and Steve. We are talking about retiring, fingers crossed, with $100,000 more. And we're going to take that through the lens of superannuation. And then we will have time for people's questions, Gem.
Yes.
Maybe just to start out with, why was this a good topic to do, other than a catchy headline? Why did you want to talk about this?
Well, we love superannuation. It's a tax-effective investment stream. But actually, the interesting stuff about some of the levers that we're going to talk about today can apply for investing outside super as well. So if you are not a fan of super, there is still something that you can take on board for this, absolutely, because it still works. And I think the figures and stuff that I'm going to use are all net of tax and fees. So you can apply it outside super as well. But super is so important. It's one of our biggest assets. Outside the family home, for most of us, it will be our biggest asset. So it makes a lot of sense for us to be understanding what we can do with it.
Cool. Well, it does. And I think that no matter whether you're a fan or not, I don't think the compounding gods really care, to be honest. Like, I think if you're trying to retire with more money, you should probably retire with the whichever mix of assets that makes sense for your retirement date. And if superannuation happens to be the better version of that, so be it. Now, Gem, for folks that need to get on kind of the ground floor, they need to enter the building of superannuation and understand where they are. What is superannuation in really simple terms?
Yes. So factually, should we do our disclaimer first?
Oh yeah, let's do that.
We love a little discllaimer first.
Yeah, we do love a disclaimer. So we are going to be answering questions. It's particularly important. General advice, rules apply, ladies and gents. Any of the information you hear in today's show is strictly general in nature. It doesn't take into account your needs, goals, or financial objectives. So don't act on this information until you've spoken to a financial planner. At the very least, don't do anything with superannuation until you've read the PDS or product disclosure statement. And of course, the TMD, the target market determination. I know there's some acronyms in there, but realistically, they're the documents that tell you what the thing is, how it works, what you pay, and some of the risks involved. And you can find more information on the screen in front of you. But the final thing I'll say is that we may bring up some charts today, charts that show compounding. They're pretty vanilla charts, but just in case you're a bit unsure, you should always just take forecasts into the future with a grain of salt and understand the assumptions that go into them. So with that said, we can move on. Now, what is superannuation, Gem?
Yes, so superannuation is a tax vehicle, and people always get really surprised when I say super is not an investment. So superannuation itself is not an investment. It's a tax vehicle. It's a structure. You can invest within it, but the risk that people tend to associate with super doesn't actually come from the structure itself. It comes from what you put in it, which we're going to talk about today, that you actually have a lot of control over. But super itself, I like to explain it like a bucket. While we're working, that bucket is filling up, and all super funds will call that accumulation super. So think of the bucket filling up, you are putting contributions in, hopefully it's getting some returns and things, and that is building. The goal is to have as much in that bucket as possible for retirement. And in retirement, think of putting a tap on that bucket and then drawing money out to fund your lifestyle when the work tap has turned off.
Okay, so we push all this money into bucket. Bucket then has a leaky hole in it in the future, and that gives us some money in the future. I like it.
That's right.
Yeah, so Gemma, just for folks that don't know, Gemma is the queen of superannuation, or at least that's the moniker that I've given to her, but Gemma has a lot of experience in this regard. So just think about it as like a big bucket that we're filling up, either through employer contributions, or you can do it yourself by adding more, and we'll talk about some of those things today. So we do have a few slides. We've moved through that disclaimer. How important is the right fund? I can answer this rhetorical question potentially. It's very important, and you don't have to take our word for it. Effectively, there was a Productivity Commission report done a few years ago. This is where the government does something that's really quite interesting and gets into the weeds and some of the research here. And what they found was that if someone younger in life, say in their 20s, had to pick a superannuation fund, and whatever may come next, the super fund that they pick was the higher performing one versus the lower performing option they could have picked, the results are actually profound. So most people think, oh, if I pick a good super fund or a good investment option, yeah, that will help a little bit. But because you've got such a long time to grow your money, the actual difference between a top performing one and a low performing one, or a high fee one and a low fee one that's the same otherwise, is substantial. And what they actually found is that funds that were in the top quartile versus funds that are in the bottom quartile over this person's working life, they found that pick a good one, 1.2 million. Pick a bad one, $560,000. The difference is 600 grand. Or in this person's case, the way I like to think about this is not the balance, because at one point or another, the number that you have inside your wealth is arbitrary. But what they actually showed was that was the equivalent of 13 years of lost pay. So in other words, what it turned out to be was 13 working years to make up the difference. And I think that's a really good way to frame it, Gem, is
It's huge.
the actual impact is not dollars and cents. It's actually years of your life that you would have to work to catch up. And so I think if you reframe it that way, I think it's a really good illustration of how this simple decision, it seems, earlier in life can be such a big outcome later in life. And if you don't have to work for 13 years, I mean, that's pretty bloody good if you don't have to do that, right?
Yeah, and this, as we'll see from the slides that are going to come up, the earlier that you do things, like you can do tiny tweaks and they make massive differences. But usually when we see people care about it, or it start to be on their mind and they're willing to kind of look into it and really understand, it's usually in the later years when it becomes a priority. They can see retirement coming, but the steps that you have to take, the more risk or the higher contributions and things to get to the same point is really drastic compared to if you just made those smaller tweaks. If anybody's thinking, I don't know where my superannuation is, or if you've got lost super, a really great place to check for that is on your MyGov account. So your MyGov account, you log on, you'll have the ATO services linked, and then you'll see a drop down there that says superannuation. It will pull in where funds have recorded super for you, lost, unclaimed super. Now, really importantly, they only update the balance once a year. So you might look at it and then log on to the fund's actual portal and get a bit of a surprise. I've already got some text messages from friends saying, oh, my balance is higher than on MyGov, but that's because they only report once a year and update it. So this is something that you want to check every couple of years, at least, even if you might have your super all the area, like all in one area and think you're all over it.
Good one. I like it. Yeah. So that's probably we did a recording not too long ago on free money, basically. If I've characterized it this way, it's like finding the lost superannuation funds, finding the lost bank accounts, finding all that stuff. And there's ways that you can check to see if there's just other money. It's not just this website. You can go to the ASIC website for lost money as well. So there's potentially some money against your name and you just don't even know. Now, Gem, we did come up with this idea with Sway from Perla about this idea of how do we help people, with the topic that's really relevant to them, which is boosting their superannuation. And we wanted to give it a bit of a punchy title. So hopefully retiring with $100,000 more. We've already demonstrated how potentially some people if they're earlier in life, can potentially just pick a better fund and that might help them, which it would.
Yeah.
But we have a few different scenarios we want to run through with people.
Yes. So let's put 100,000 into context. So imagine you're retired today. What would what would you spend an extra 100 grand on if you had it in your super? A boat. Would you go a boat?
I'd probably go. Well, I was just telling Millie in our team this morning that I have a boat and I haven't been on it in a year, but I'm thinking of getting another one, like upgrading. So I would probably go in retirement years. I'd probably actually use it. So that'd probably be a decent investment by then. So that's probably what I'd do. What would you do?
To me, that's probably 10, or that might be pushing it, 8-ish overseas trips, which I'd be planning on doing anyway, but maybe they would just be a little bit more lavish. But it's a significant amount of money.
But this is coming, ladies and gentlemen, this is coming from the the Honourable Gemma Mitchell, who said that she could go to Japan for $7,000 with 2 kids.
No, I thought it was 5. I thought 3 of us would go to Japan for $5,000. It's okay. So I've rejigged it, and now the ex-husband is coming as well. But I think it's going to be 15,000 for all 4 of us. But
Okay.
I have no sense
so let's
of
say
what life costs.
So let's go. $100,000 at retirement is an extra couple of holidays overseas, nice ones.
Yes.
If you are in the chat and you want to share what would you do with an extra $100,000 in retirement, keeping in mind retirement for most people is 60 or 65, what would that $100,000 do for you? Put yourself in future use shoes. What would you be doing with it? Now, Gem, we are going to take it through the lens of 30s,
Yes.
40s, and 50s, if
And
I'm not
50s.
mistaken.
Yep.
Let's go through these different scenarios of how someone could potentially go about boosting their super before retirement age.
Yeah, so just in general, for you to boost your super in any capacity, there's really 3 levers. You add more, you earn more, or you pay less. So paying less is obviously fees, but you want to balance that as well. Cheapest isn't always best. But when I say pay less, I'm thinking also insurance. So lots of people have insurance premiums that come out of their super, and it does a lot of damage. It eats away and stuff. So having less money come out of it, whether it's fees, insurance, or if you've dipped into it at different times. But they're the 3 levers: taking less out of it, earning more, or adding more or earning more in returns. So we're going to take fees away, and all of these returns that I've got in here are net of tax and fees, which is a really important thing that you want to do when you're comparing funds. But let's look at a 30-year-old, because I made the point before, you do less to get more the earlier. And this is assuming that they're retiring at 35. So this person's got like a 35 years.
35 years. So 65 years retirement,
Quick maths.
30 years old. Yep, cool.
Yep.
And these charts come from the Money Smart website?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's got like inflation and stuff built into it. So if you wanted an extra 100,000 when you retired at 65, you would need to add an $1,800 net a year. So you might do after tax contributions, pre-tax, as long as 1,800 was staying in that fund after tax was taken out, that would get you there. Or you could increase your performance. So you might have been in like a balance fund or something that didn't suit you, and then you went up, or a higher performing fund. Now that would obviously have to continuously perform at that. But this example of 8.3% isn't crazy.
No.
Like,
so
that's
some
still pretty
funds are doing that.
conservative. Yeah. So that wasn't too bad, right? So at 30, you do a small tweak by actually adding money, or you make sure that you're in a fund that performs, or it's meeting your risk profile, which is a higher kind of one, and you were hitting that 8.3, you would get to that extra 100,000.
So Frostbolter did say in the chat, I would also add in a review of your investment choice, i.e. balance versus growth. And that's it, right?
Yep.
That's
that
where you get that
you
extra
the performance. It wouldn't necessarily be taking risk outside of your risk tolerance. It might just be you were in a lifestyle option that didn't suit your risk profile, or it was that the fund, so in this case, the fund might have performed well, but it had higher fees. So the net return wasn't that great. So there's all these levers. You could do either, or you could do both.
Yeah, for sure. Angelica in the chat also said just travel more would be the outcome. So that would be at retirement, travel more. Who doesn't want to do that? I just did some quick math thanks to my friend Google over here. And $1,800 a year is actually not that much. It's $150 a month, which seems reasonable for people. Interestingly, we have like clients, like financial advice clients, and one of the ways that they are doing it, and I'm not advocating for anyone to do this, by the way, it's just interesting how some parents and grandparents have gone about it, is they're actually putting money into their children or grandchildren's superannuation fund as a way to help them later in life. This is obviously a very focused decision, because you're saying, here you go, kids or grandkids. You won't get that until you're much later in life, but you'll thank me I'll probably be dead by then. But when you get to 60 or 65,
you will still thank them. Yeah,
you'll still thank them, but you'll be thanking them at maybe in the cemetery rather than in real life. But
so not all super
is a
funds
really
let
interesting
you
one.
for younger, and I would definitely talk to the parents about it. But one thing that I will, if it's still around when my kids are working, is so if your kids are working and they're earning income, then the government co-contribution, if you're earning under the 47, you put $1,000 in, they get 500. So it has to be earned income. Like they have to be earning income. So that's something that I'll consider when my kids are working. Because that's like a great thing. So I could be putting in 1,000 for them. They'll be getting 1,500. They're nearly at this 1,800.
Okay, so
We'll
once
see what
they're
the rules
working,
are
that's
then.
what you would do.
Has to be once they're working, because it has to be at least 10% of the income has to be like earned. Yeah. So it can't be like investment income or something. It needs to, at least 10% needs to come from them with a job. Yeah.
Cool. Like
Somebody's asked where this app is. So this is the Money Smart retirement calculator that we've used here. So you can go in, plug in all your numbers. There's also on Money Smart a calculator. If you were like, for my situation, I've got 2,000 extra, and it tells you if it's better pre-tax, post-tax, that kind of stuff. But your super fund might be able to answer that as well.
Yeah, cool. Cool. So I'm just going to put in some rough numbers and just go, whatever that is, it's getting results. We'll just see what it does in just a sec. There was another question, a comment from John T. Says, by the time I retire, the extra 100K would probably be neck and neck with inflation. Good thing is, John T, the figures are actually adjusted for inflation. But
so we've got it on today's dollars so our brains can help, like our brains can understand it. But yes, it's adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, as Fiona said
pretty
earlier,
conservative
cost of living.
inflation, I think. There's like Money Smart will be 3 or 3.5 or something.
Yeah, so there you go. You can go and use the charts for yourself. Very good point. Now, 30 years old, right? Some people are probably thinking, Gemma, like myself, what about for the people that have got a few more years, a few more kilometers on the clock? 30 seems easy. 30 seems like, hey, it's $150 once I start working.
30's the easy one.
A month. Yeah, that's pretty cool. What about if you're a little bit older? So maybe you're starting to see some gray hairs just on the sides of your head, or you're starting to lose your hair, in my case.
Starting.
What are you thinking? Yeah.
Sorry. So 40, this is me. Okay, so 40s, you to get to the same amount. Now, you'll notice that I've changed the balances in these slides. That's the way I said I feel personally attacked. So do I. Okay, so you'll notice that I've changed the balance as well. So where I got this figure was from the average balances at these people's at this age group. Okay, so for you it might be totally different, but you get the idea. So for a 40-year-old that's got about 100,000 in super and they want to add that by 65, instead of 1,800 net having to go in the 150, they have to do about $1,000 more. 2,800 net has to stay in the super fund as an extra contribution above what work put in for them.
Yep.
Or to get the same outcome with not putting extra money in, they would have to go from the 7.5 we had before up a whole 1%. So other person needed to do 0.8. Yeah, this one needs to do 1%. Still not crazy.
Yep.
Still really realistic.
Jody has asked a question. Are you saying that you put in 1,800 each year for 35 years? Yes, that's what we're saying. So you would have to put that in every year, Jody. And remember, superannuation is taxed at a reduced rate of 15% versus most people's investments earning, well, soon, a minimum of 30%, but up from there. So this is kind of factoring in all of those different numbers and mechanics, if that makes sense. But yes, it is 1,800, so 1,200 a year or 2,800 for this case. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. So in the example of adding more money, you're just getting the standard 7.5 return, or you haven't put extra money in and you've got a higher return. What do you need to do to get an extra 100? So you might go like, so somebody, Jody said, yeah, so that's 63,000 of your own contributions to get 100, whereas the performance one is no extra contributions to get 100, or you could be doing a little bit of both. Liza said, what if you're self-employed? So with these calculations, I have assumed that employer contributions are going in. So you would have to do that 12%. So 12,000 in this case, because they're earning 100 plus that.
Yeah. So there's another question. There's another point here to be made, which is that if you are self-employed, you can contribute to your own super fund, of course. Remember that. And legally, you actually have to contribute to your own super fund, because if you are an employee, you are an employee. So definitely keep that in the back of your mind. Me personally, we did an episode not so long ago where we compared, where we looked at what Australians do with their superannuation fund and the average levels. I am actually below average. I know it's hard to say, gents, but I am
just in your super balance.
Below average. And big reason for that is I've been self-employed for basically all of my working life except for 6 months. So there are times where I didn't pay super because I didn't have money to pay super. So I've got more catching up to do. So I felt attacked before. Indeed, I am probably closer to the 40 bracket now. So this is very much me. I'm going to have to put in a little bit more than even this suggests here. So that was a great question. Bella, you said, can you touch upon super contributions for small scale ABNs? Yes, so same thing. First year of business, unsure of annual income. Now we can't give you personal advice, Bella, here, but just generally speaking, what we can say is that in our broad philosophy and opinion, most people should be actively considering adding money to super, because even as a self-employed person, you're still technically employed, right? So you need to be very mindful of this. And it's not always an option in your own business, but there are 2.5-ish million businesses in Australia. And there are a lot of those people that are just like micro businesses. Like they maybe have side hustles, or maybe they have, a tradesman or a tradeswoman working and for themselves as a contractor. Still really important to make sure you're thinking about super, because it is dollar cost averaging on steroids. I hope that makes sense.
Ideally, if you're a business owner, you want to treat superannuation like an expense when you factor in how much you earn, your tax, all of that kind of stuff. Because if you were working for an employee, chances are you're working less hours and you'd be getting paid super. So when you're working out what your cost is of your services and whatever, you want to add superannuation into it, because that is part of your value, and you want to be, as soon as possible, putting money away for future, whether it's super or it's outside, whatever that looks like, but just making sure that you're transferring wealth and income outside of your business into assets that are going to, turn that tap on for you one day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been some great questions, people. Please chuck them into the comments. We've got people sending comments in from LinkedIn. If you're on YouTube, all that sort of stuff, chuck it all in there, because we will get to your questions in just a moment. But we've got one more scenario that we need to go through, Gemma. Now,
yes,
if 30 was easier, 40 was doable.
40 wasn't too bad. Yeah.
I think for most people, like, you're going to get your default superannuation contributions if you work for someone. Or if you are, self-employed, you can start adding now. You don't have to just add 2,800. You can add a lot more than 2,800. Next one is, you guessed it, 50. What can we do
50.
at 50?
So it jumps up so significantly. It jumps up nearly double, which is crazy for only a 10-year difference. But it's because that time frame it's so much shorter. It's only the 15%. So with this one, you would have to add 5,500 extra every year instead of 2,800, again net after, depending on whichever way you put the contributions in. Net has to stay in there, or you have to get nearly 2% more, so go from 7.5 to 9.3. Now, that's probably still not totally unrealistic from the performances that I've seen lately over a 10+ year, but still, you have to be comfortable with that level of risk and that type of risk appetite for your investment returns. And you're getting a lot closer to retirement. So if you're making this change, there are lots of different considerations with your risk. But yeah, it's a big jump up. So still absolutely doable if your time frame's only 15 years, but it is really significant. It changes quite a lot.
It does. Just a quick one. Joel's just jumped in. We'll come back to this 50-year-old slide in just a second. The slide itself, actually, I shouldn't say is not 50 years old. It's only probably a couple of days old.
Fresh.
But for those of us that may be thinking about this, Joel said, to Liz's point, for those who are self-employed and don't meet the min 12% contribution, we are unable to use the calculator. You actually can use the calculator. Just change it from 12% down to whatever your amount is. Remember that when you are a sole trader or ABN,
see,
right?
that's got minimum. See, it's got minimum there, but I think there's somewhere that you tick that you're not an employee.
Okay,
there's definitely a way to do it.
My misunderstanding.
Put your salary as 0.
Yeah,
put
put
your
your salary.
salary as 0 because you don't have because it's trying to do the salary guarantee, a superannuation guarantee, and then instead go 0 income and then go
Make
extra
additional
contributions. Yeah,
Gotcha.
and then just put whatever you want that you're doing. Yeah.
So just so we know,
Good pick up, Joel.
Good one, Joel. So just so we know the types of contribution you would put in if you're self-employed, is when your employer puts in a contribution, they're called concessional contributions. So they go under the umbrella of before tax, right? So you could just replace that figure in here. You could say like, it was a monthly, I do $1,000, say, for example. This would be the equivalent of that same bit from earlier on potentially. So keep that in mind. Now, back to our 50s chart, because I just wanted to clarify you can still use the tool. I just butchered it a bit. 50-year-old, how do we go about it, Gem?
Yeah, so you're putting in that 5,500, so a lot more, or you're getting that higher return. Somebody's just put in the comments that there's other things that you can do at 50. You might have more disposable income. You might be downsizing. Absolutely. But if you just wanted to get to the 100,000 without doing, and we're comparing those ages, this is what you have to do. Yeah, so a lot more than what you have to do at 30, even double what you have to do at 40.
Yeah, cool. And the big one here is that you can increase performance, and I want to insert a cautionary tale, not like one of those fairy tales, but like an actual reality, is that if you go into your superannuation fund and you try to maximize returns by taking the most risk you possibly can, you should know that maths doesn't work that way in finance. What can happen is that if you take too much risk, your returns actually go down. So there is a point in finance and in investing where too much risk is too much risk. It's not like, I'll just keep turning it up and up and up and up and up until I got more and more return. There is actually a point where that relationship doesn't hold true. If you want to look up how to build portfolios and you want to become like a full finance nerd like me and Gem, you can look up something called the efficient frontier, and you will love the math that follows. Basically, it shows you that there are optimal portfolios based on risk and return, and you can go deep in that. That's like university level finance. You don't have to go there, but just trust me when I say more risk does not always equal more return. You've got to think about it really sensibly in that regard. You can see that there's a question from Robin over on Facebook. We'll come back to some of these questions in just a moment. I think for a lot of people at this stage of life too, Gem, it's not all about super, as you said before. It's like probably got to a point in our careers, at least one of us, if we're in a relationship, say, for example, where we might be able to earn a little bit more. Maybe if we've got kids, maybe they're starting to get a bit easier. Maybe. I don't know. Just guessing here.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But in your 50s, hopefully debt is going down, or if not gone completely. You might be having a bit of a plan on maybe you're going to retain debt in retirement, but there's downsizing or something there. But this is at 50, you definitely want to be getting financial advice, because this is how you map out, the between 50 and 60, and at 60 all these doors open up, like cool strategies like transition to retirement and things. So the things that you do in this decade are really important to make sure that retirement's going to be an option. But yeah, the way that you make contributions, the tax, how often, all of those kind of things. And yes, you might have other assets outside. Super's not the be all and end all, but because we're doing net returns here, net tax and net contributions, you could apply this to an outside share portfolio or what other investment that you have.
Cool. Okay. So as we can see, the closer you get to retirement age, the more dollar figure you have to put in.
Yes.
You also have to stretch a bit more. So this is why consistency beats anything else. If you're the earlier you're in life, you have a head start, obviously, but consistency is what will get you through, whether the market is up, whether you think the market's going to fall, whatever. This is why people who try and time their way through the stock market with their superannuation, I'm going to go all cash. I'm going to go investing. I'm going to go all cash. I'm going to go investing. This is, Charlie Munger famously said that compounding is very powerful. Don't interrupt it. So what he meant by that witty comment is that people who try and time their way into extra contributions or time their way in and out of the stock market when it's up or down, these are the people that don't get the full benefit of the long-term compounding. So consistency wins. Automate as much as you can. dollar cost average. These are the sensible things that will get you there.
Yeah. The only thing I
sorry.
kind of contradict on that sometimes is that is totally true. But when I talk to, people in their 20s and 30s, I'm like, put as much, say you want to put money into super, but they're thinking, well, down the track, I'm going to have kids or I'm going to have a debt. Do what you can at the time, because even if you have to stop it or reduce it, the compounding is still working in your favor. And it is so much better doing it for a short amount of time than not doing it at all. So
Oh,
it might
absolutely.
be, so yeah, and it works perfectly with that, but it might be you're thinking, I'm going to be starting a business in a few years and not being able to pay myself, or I'm going to be starting a family, or I want to travel for a few years. Prior to putting money in, that will lessen the damage that happens in that period. Even if you can't continue with it, is really important.
So one of the things, absolutely, you got to do what you can do earlier in life. Like there's surely going to be some questions on this in just a second. I was not prioritizing superannuation. I said that before. I was prioritizing starting my own business. And that was a fully informed decision that I made. And I'm very happy that I made that decision. Now, you could say it could have gone the other way or something like that, for sure. But I just knew that earlier in life, I could afford to take those risks. Because there are limits on the amount that can go into super every year, which is currently $32,500 for this financial year for concessional contributions, plus or minus a few other cool quirks that we can talk about. Realistically, I knew that if I wanted to create a lot of wealth, maybe that I may be a bit more kind of hamstrung in the future, but I was going to take the risk on something else in the short term. Obviously, I wanted to buy a house as well. That was really important to me. So there's other things that come up through time. But one of the great things about being employed is that your employer pays your superannuation for you. You are dollar cost averaging. And if you do set up an automation or something like that, you can do that in the background. Even if it's like we saw today for young people, if you could do $150 a month, you are like crushing it. If you can't, that's okay. Another big one is when people have kids. For example, if the husband or the wife or whatever the case may be takes some time off work, you can use something called superannuation contribution splitting, which is where the partner who's working splits some money with the other person and keeps that like the dollar cost averaging for both of you alive. So very good things there. Now we do have quite a few questions. Let's get through them. If you do have questions, please drop them in the comments or the chat, wherever you are. If you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube's, or even on Instagram, let me know and we'll kind of get through these questions. So where do you want to start, Gemma? Is there anything that caught your eye on the way through?
Yes, there's a great question that I love, and lots of people don't know this, and it's, why does it matter to do your statement of intent before the rollover happens for your insurances? So let me explain what this actually means. So if you are going to make a contribution to superannuation yourself, it's not coming from your employer, it will generally go in as a non-concessional contribution, so after tax. And then there's a form that you do. It might be a paper form, it might be an online one with your super fund that says to them, hey, of that money I put into super, could you actually convert it to concessional? So take some tax out. And so the fund will generally deduct 15% tax. And then when you go to do your tax return, you put in there that, hey, I added this money to super, and that is a tax deduction to you. So it's as if once you do your tax return, it works out as if it had gone through via salary sacrifice or by your employer. So you've lowered your taxable income with that contribution. So that's a great way for people to put money in throughout the year, and then they might chat to their accountant, work out what their earnings are, and work out if they're going to claim a tax deduction. But when you do that, you have to do this notice of intent to claim, the document that says, hey, I'm treating this as concessional. You have to do that before any money rolls out of your super fund. So if you were going to change super funds, you've identified a different one's better for you, you need to do that form and get the acknowledgement from the fund, which can take like 10 days. And before that rolls over, otherwise you lose the ability to claim it as a tax deduction. So it's very straightforward. If it's a full rollover to a new fund, you've gone, no, this super fund's better for me. Do the notice of intent to claim first, because once you move the money out, you can't do it. But what trips people up is if they have external insurance in their super. So not Australian super with Australian super insurance premiums coming out each month. Like they've gone to a financial advisor and it's got a rollover to a external insurance company, and they've got income protection, all that kind of stuff linked to their super. That money, the fund doesn't see that it's an insurance premium. It looks like it's a rollover to another fund. It goes to a little holding fund. So you were technically doing a partial rollover. So it might only be $1,000 or 5,000 or something. It might not be your whole balance, but it's a partial rollover going out of your super, and it means that it impacts your ability on what you can claim. So this is a really tricky one. The timing on when you put money into super when external policies come out is really, really tricky. Now, because the whole balance hasn't gone out, you haven't lost the whole deduction, but the super fund does does a calculation, and it's a nightmare. So if you were going to add money into super, you would do the notice of intent to claim before external money rolls out, whether you're changing funds or doing an insurance external policy. It's tricky. Does that even make sense? Like there's a lot.
I'm gonna bring some Mr. Squiggle to this really quickly. So effectively, I'm a confused super person. If I have a big super fund like this and I put more money in, right? I need to tell them to say, hey, that needs to be done for tax, right? I need you to round figures, $10,000 I put in. I need you to treat that not as just like a standard $10,000, but I need you to treat it as a concessional $10,000, in which case the super fund will take 15% out and send that to the ATO for me. That's correct? So far, so good? Okay. So, but what you're saying is if I change super funds, I should fill in the form before I do that, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Second of all, some people have a separate little mini super fund off the back that just does their insurance. That's what you were saying, right? That's
Yes,
INS.
that's right.
So they have this other little mini super fund that gets some money somehow and does the insurance. And what do we need to do in that regard if we've got one of those setups?
Sorry, somebody said my microphone's a little bit
loud, maybe.
Echoing, sorry. Yes, so that is considered a partial rollout of your superannuation. So if you wanted to make sure that every cent you had put into your super got to claim the full tax deduction, you would do that form beforehand.
Yes.
The way said it's sounding okay. Okay, good. Yeah, so you need to do that form beforehand. But the good thing about these forms is you can do a notice of intent to claim, have the stuff go over, and then you can always do an adjustment. It's called a variation. So you go because say you then add more money in or something, you can do a variation. Okay, so notice of intent to claim and then a variation of that notice is totally able to be done. But if you're going to be doing external insurance, it's always done through a financial advisor. It should absolutely be done through a financial advisor. It's kind of like the mortgage brokers of loans.
Okay.
And then they can help you with the timing and things and making sure that you're aware of what that the implications.
Okay, cool. I like it. Okay, cool. So yeah, so that Luke did also say that in his comment, just said that if anyone else is self-employed and put extra money in, don't forget to fill in that notice of intent to claim. That is the really important form that I mentioned over here, or Gemma mentioned.
Yes.
So you got to fill that in afterwards.
Yeah, so the contribution needs to hit in the financial year. The form just has to be done before you submit your tax return. So as long as the money goes in well before 30th of June and the funds got it, and then you might do the form in July, just as long as it's before you did your tax return. So they don't both have to be in the financial year.
Yeah, gotcha. Love it. So really, really good. Travis says in the chat, as a teenager, I was told to add to my super, which I thankfully did, probably until I bought a home. Now, after not working full time for 20 years and 7 kids, I'm well above average for my age. Thanks to that. That's great.
That's really
wonderful, Travis. The power of compounding. We've probably all read the Barefoot Investor book where he said in there, if you just put money in for 5 years, that may be enough to get you way ahead of the pack, right? Rather than adding money for the rest of your life. So fantastic compounding in action. So John T asked a question about, can you elaborate on the split between parents? Are you saying the working partner can allocate money to the other's super? So I'll try this one. And then if I get it wrong, Gemma will go, no. So every year you can make contributions to your super. So in the current financial year, it's $32,500. Crucially, that includes what your employer is putting as part of the super guarantee. So hypothetically, I'm working, my partner's not. I have $10,000 for round figures go into my superannuation fund. I can fill in a form and tell my super fund, hey, I want you to split some of that money with my partner. And you can split up to, this is where my math goes, to 85% of
That's
that
right.
amount. So if I had $10,000 go in, the 15% gets sent for tax to the ATO by the super fund, hypothetically in this case, to the super fund. And then the $8,500 could go across to my partner's super fund. Now, you might not want to do 85%. You might want to just do half or something like that. But very, very common strategy. Now, sometimes people are like, well, why would I do that? It's all our money, isn't it? Well, aside from, being a good maybe relationship builder, the second thing is that there are substantial benefits for two people having equalized super benefits, the super balances, when you approach retirement. For example, if I was a financial planner, I would rather two clients rock up with a $400,000 super balance each than one have 700 and one have 100. There's more strings that you can potentially pull with a lower super balance for both partners. And also, as I said, it feels good. If they're different ages, you can access super at different times and there's more strategies. Have I got that right?
Yes, yep, that's exactly right. And there's something called the transfer balance cap, which is a great problem to have. It's 2.1 mil, I think it's at the moment each. So really often we see people with disparities of wealth. One will get close to that cap, if not be over it, and one will be way under it. And as we talked about contribution caps and things, it's really hard later to do big chunks of money to even stuff up. So if you slowly do it over that time. Another reason that you might do the super split, other than just compounding and things, is, so I used to do it with my ex-husband to cover his insurance premiums because we wanted enough money going in there. So you can do stuff like that. So the money that goes over is non-concessional for the person that receives it, but it stays on the concessional contribution for the person who earned the money. So it's not a way for you to get under your cap if you're going to go over it or get a higher cap. You don't share the cap. It's just moving the money over, and then that money has a job within that person's super. But again, that's a form that you do.
Yes, cool. So there's so many ways that we could take this, but I guess one of the things is we just want to remind people. One is you can have insurance inside superannuation.
Yeah.
Is that always the best thing? Not necessarily. So get financial advice if you're unsure. Someone did say earlier on, but if I do increase my my insurance cover inside super, should I add extra? That's a personal decision that you can make. But obviously, money that goes to your insurance from your super deducts from the super balance, right? That's how it's paid. So you might want to think about that longer term, like what's best for me. There's plenty of education and literature on the website. We did have a comment on Facebook come through about using the Perla app. This is more for educational purposes today, but you can head to the Perla website and you can see blogs, you can see videos, you can see podcasts, you can see live webinars and stuff like this, and a bunch of Q&A on many of the topics that we have talked about today so far. So that's all available at perla.com. So Amanda's asked a personal question, which I might generalize for the rest of the show, which is, what happens if you're over 50? You're towards 60. You got money in the bank and no mortgage potentially. This is all generally, of course. Someone that's at 60 or approaching retirement, Gem, I won't ask you for specifics, but I'll maybe just ask you to think about some of the things that people tend to make, some of the decisions that they tend to make in the lead up to hitting that big retirement button.
Yes. So timing around when you want to retire is really important, and you need to know which ages different things come into play. So for super, you've potentially got access from 60 if you retire, whereas if you're still working, 65 is the next kind of goalpost that they don't care if you're working or not. So you need to know what assets you have and how they're going to fund your retirement. For example, if you wanted to retire at 58, you're going to need at least 2 years of income before you can access super. So that's the first layer, and then super might kick in. If you are going to be relying on the age pension, which the age comes in at 67 eligibility, you need to make sure that you have enough of your own money, whether it's super or outside super, to fund your lifestyle between whenever you decide to retire and then 67. So there's these key ages that you kind of want to plot out and go, when do I want to retire? What do I have access to? How does that actually help me? Because if that's tied up in an investment property, for example, and there's no income that comes from that, might pay a mortgage or something, that's not really an asset that's going to help you. So you want to map out, when do I retire and what assets do I have and when can I access them? How do I access them? Is it capital or is it income? So that's kind of the first thing that you want to be considering. And that's what a financial advisor would be working with you on. They'd kind of be looking at big picture, what's the end goal? How much do we want to have in investable assets that you can travel and fund your lifestyle, do that, and then work backwards? What assets do you already have that tick those boxes? And what do we need to do? Do we add more to super or do we add more to investments outside? If you have no mortgage at this age, you own your home, and that's the appropriate home for you to have in retirement, that is an amazing position to be in for retirement in Australia. We kind of set up to favor owning your own home in retirement with age pension. Everything kind of looks at that as the number one kind of thing that you want to be doing. So at 58, that's a great thing to be debt free and be owning your home.
Cool. Yeah, I think I would agree. Now, just quickly, I am one of those learners. I think they call it kinetic. Someone can educate me on that in the chat. But if I don't see something drawn out, I kind of fall asleep. Not to say that that definition was bad, Gemma. I think it was amazing.
Yeah,
but
I'll take that forward.
yeah, take that to HR. Just quickly, if I kind of think of it like a magical line, there's this magical line that you cross with your superannuation. On one side, you are standing there and you're like sad because you're taxed at 15%, right? On the other side of the line, you're happy because your money is taxed at 0%. So what is this magical line in the middle? It's called pension age. So basically, the moment that you can get to this, well, it's called preservation age, but let's not think about that. It's called pension age because that's what we'll call it. It's when your super fund flicks from accumulation to pension, right? Really important to understand. Between 60 and 65 is the typical range for people, depending on their work circumstances and a couple other things potentially. This is what Gemma was just talking about. And it's a really important concept to understand because effectively this is what should provide for you when you get to retirement. Really important to understand. When I say pension, I'm not talking about the age pension from Centrelink. That is different. They're both called pension. Don't ask me why, but one's a superannuation pension, one is the age pension. It's kind of like the Medicare levy and the Medicare levy surcharge. People don't know that they're like different things, but they're a thing. So anyway, this is a really important thing to understand because from a financial planning perspective for yourself, you can be like, okay, well, I can turn my super fund to that and then it can be, oh, okay, tax-free, and then I can draw an income. There are rules, obviously, but this is some of the things that you should get in your head about what the benefits of super in later in life may be. We do have a question that was sent through on Instagram, which I've got here on my phone, Gem, from Tien says, what should we be looking for when we compare super funds? A really important question, no doubt.
That is a great question. So you need to understand what you want in a super fund as well. So looking at the main things that you'll be looking at are the fees, the investment options. Does it have the options that you actually want? So it doesn't need to potentially have all the bells and whistles and have hundreds of options if that's not what you're going to use. So you want to know, how do I want to invest? And then do they have that? So if ethical investing is really important to you, that would be one of the things that you were checking. So you want to be having a look at, what do they have the investment options that you want? And then what is the fee for that? When we compare funds, we also want to be looking at performance. Now, that is no indication of what's going to happen in the future, but it gives us a good idea of kind of what's happened in the past and how they've dealt with things. So when you compare funds, you want to look at the longest periods possible, ideally kind of 10 plus years, but make sure that you're comparing apples for apples. So if you're comparing a fund A and then you're comparing fund B, you can't compare one that's got like 70% growth assets and then one that's got 90, because the 91 probably is going to look better, but it had lots of volatility. So first of all, make sure that you know what kind of investment you want, and then look for similar ones that have got similar asset splits. Then you want to look at the fees and the performance. And then the final part of it before you jump ship is always the insurance. So if you have insurance in super, You need to have that sorted before you change funds because you will lose that. So if you have one of these external policies that I talked about, you went to a financial advisor and it's just linked, it's doing that rollover, you can pretty much move that anywhere. You just fill out a direct debit form and then it moves over, which is easy. But if you were, say, in Australian Super and you had Australian Super insurance, if you move to another fund, you lose that cover. So you would want to make sure the new fund either has the cover you want, the conditions, the terms, and the costs before you change, or best case, you would go to a financial advisor, get that external policy, and then you could just choose your super based on the right place to have your super, not where the insurance should be. But that actually leads in perfectly to another question I saw about should you have two super funds?
Oh, yes, from Lifestyle. Yes.
Oh, yeah. So they've said they have two super funds. So one of the biggest misconceptions, side note on this, is people think that you should have one super fund because those ads, compare the pair and stuff, were like, did all this damage. They were like, you should only ever have one super fund. If it's intentional, one has the insurance you need that you can't get elsewhere, but one has the investment options that suit you, you can have two super funds. You will pay double fees when it comes to administration fees. That's pretty much the only one. And that might be 50 to $100 a year. But for you to have the strategy that works for you, I have two super funds. It's totally fine. You just don't want heaps without a strategy on why you have them. So totally fine to have two. Now, this question from Lifestyle was actually, can you take one as a pension and access it and then contribute to the other? Yes. So where it's really common that someone might have an accumulation fund and a pension fund is because they've retired and they've started the tap. They've started drawing on their super as a pension. And then they might have gone back to work, found another job or something, and contributions have gone. A pension is a one-way street. Money can't go into it. It can build up with returns, but you can't physically add money, so it can't take contributions. So that's when you might have two funds. One's building up your accumulation with new contributions. You might be adding yourself or work might, and the pension's drawing a minimum income out. So they're working together. And then when it gets to the point where you don't need the bucket, the accumulation anymore, you can just consolidate them.
Yep.
But
okay. So a very common strategy for people at retirement age is that they retire from work, which is one of the triggers that allow them to enter pension phase for their super. And then they think a few years later, they're like, you know what? I wouldn't mind going back to work for 1 or 2 days a week, just doing stuff that's really meaningful to me. You still get super. So where does that money go? That can go into a new accumulation strategy. A really, really popular one for younger people that are already kind of like building wealth and whatever, is they have one super fund for one thing, say if it's to hold the insurance or something like that. And then they have the other super fund, which is much more like, I want to be investing in a particular way or doing something in a particular way. So for folks, just to clarify, there are some major things that when you log in, you will see them deducted from your superannuation account. So the first thing is the investment fee. So this is the fee that applies for the investment option that you select. So this might be, say, for growth. If you select growth might be 0.7%, but high growth might be 0.4% or something like that. So you don't have to change super funds to change your investment option. Really important thing to understand. You're not changing the fund, you're just changing the strategy. You can do that online. Obviously, you want to be careful about how you do that, when you do it, etc. The other fee, which is often called an administration fee, which Gemma referred to, might be like $1.50 a week, for example, which is, by my quick math, about $76 a year, $77, something like that.
78, yeah.
78 maybe. There we go. Quick math on a podcast. $78 a year, we'll call it. With this, right, this goes to the super fund. So in the case of a very big super fund, like say Australian Super, this goes to pay for the bills for the super fund, right? This is the fee that the super fund receives. And so if someone switches their super fund, what they're actually switching is the $1.50, not necessarily the one above. So this is really important to understand, right? That goes to the super fund. Now, some people then jump into their account and they're like, oh, I've got all this insurance coming out. I've got to change super fund. Whoa, hold up a minute there, partner. This is different. This is actually for insurance. You can have this on or off with your super fund. Sometimes you'll have default levels of cover, which are applied by default. Sometimes you won't have any. It's up to you to determine if that insurance is the right insurance or speak to your advisor. I just want to kind of double click on that. I see it every day of the week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think when
yeah.
we hear people say my super is so expensive, and then we actually look, it's always insurance premiums that have come out of it. So
Yeah,
and it's fine to have them come out. You just want to make sure that it's the right cover for you and you're paying for something you actually need.
Yes. Cool. There's been some comments on the Instagram, or also on Facebook and other places. We're not really talking about individual ETFs and using shares and that type of thing today, but you absolutely could do that if you're so inclined. Not saying that you should, but you can do that with your superannuation for sure. There are platforms available that allow you to do that, and you can select ETFs just like you could outside of super. Because remember, superannuation is just kind of like this special account that has a special tax rule around it, and it's got another rule, which is the age that you have to be to access it. It's just like an account, but those are the rules that surround it. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, the good general question here is Frostbolter asking a question about pooled super versus moving to DIY style platforms. Now, we'll be high level with this, but if you have any other questions, be sure to reach out. I know some questions people have questions about Pearler itself. You can head to the Pearler website and get in contact on the Contact Us page. If you have questions for Gemma or I, you can find us on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever you get your social media, as well as the podcast. We will be coming back in about a month with another live webinar, another collab. Let's do it on Pearler's YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe to Pearler's YouTube channel if you haven't already. It's got great education. You'll see some other content from like Dave Gow from Strong Money, Hayden, of course, from Pearler. So much other stuff going on there. So check that out. Final question from Frostbolter about pooled versus DIY. Just a real quick explainer. Pooled superannuation funds would be big superannuation funds like, say, Australian Super or Australian Retirement Trust, Host Plus, these types of names that people are familiar with. There are other options that allow you to be a bit more hands-on without having to create a self-managed super fund. That's another end of the spectrum, which is like you do it all you kind of self, or you get your accountant and your financial advisor to help you. We're not talking about those ones. We're talking about the ones in the middle. Some big super funds like to call this like a member direct or a kind of light version of a super. But basically, it's just saying, how much control do you want? Do you want a little bit more? That's kind of the option. Now, Gemma, maybe I'll rephrase this question with a very simple one. You said you had 2 super funds before.
I do. I've got 2 super funds.
What's your configuration?
So I have a minimum balance in one, which the minimum balance is actually 6,000 to keep the insurance going, but I've got 10,000 in one, and that funds my insurance. And I have selected something that's called an opt-in, which means if no contributions go in for 18 months, they have to keep my insurance going, which one of the government rules was if no contributions go in or it drops under 6,000, they cancel your insurance, and lots of people lost insurance. So I've opted into insurance, and I try to keep the balance around 10,000. One's just got insurance, but then the bulk of my money, my future contributions, my employer ones, all go into a different fund that was much better for me. Now, I don't actually do, this surprises people, I don't actually do any member direct investing. I choose from the multi-manager, so that
like the pre-mixed options.
Yeah. So that's pulled with lots of different members, and that is the way that I'm very comfortable to do it. So I don't do any direct investing in my own superannuation.
Okay, fair enough.
And too busy for that.
Yeah, got too much super to talk about to do more super stuff. So I have a very similar configuration. I have a big super fund, Aussie Super actually, that just does like more like my insurance and that sort of stuff, which I set up years ago because I thought, I just needed. People keep telling me when you're younger, you can get better health, better life insurance. So I should probably do something.
How did that 40% hike go? Have you checked that yet?
Well, that's the second year in a row, if I'm not mistaken. Damn you, Australian Super increasing my fees. But anyway, it is what it is. So that's the first thing. We can take our frustrations offline at risk of some other letters in the email in the mailbox. The other thing that I have is a separate superannuation account, which I can add to ETFs and that sort of stuff. So I'm in the process of setting all that up now, and it allows me to just kind of, invest according to my own preferences. Even in my Australian Super one, I still select how much I want in particular stock markets. So how much international, Australia, etc. I think most people don't need to do that. I think most people can just keep it plain Jane simple and just select the one that's the right thing for their risk profile. I think that's like appropriate for most people. I think that's pretty good. But for me, obviously I'm into the stuff, so I love it, and I'm happy to be a bit more hands-on.
I think people think that they need a self-managed super fund where you're the director and you've got all these responsibilities and you set it up with an accountant to have control over how you invest. You absolutely don't. If you're with an industry fund, there will be a menu of options. They might even have member direct where you can pick your own shares. There's a wrap accounts that are kind of like this hybrid between where it's like more like a brokerage platform and you can pick direct shares and different things. So you can have a lot of control without going full self-managed super fund, which still absolutely suits people for different reasons. But I usually find people don't understand that even in an industry fund, that you do have control over how you invest, like a lot more than they realize. So always start with that first before you move to something like a self-managed super fund, because it depends on what you're looking for the fund to do. It might be that your existing one does, or one that's available in the market does it for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So as we go away from today, everyone, we don't want you to take action necessarily with your super, but we just want you to be mindful of how it's performing, what fees you charge, and is it right for you? As a secondary element, we talked a lot about insurance today. That wasn't our intent coming into today, but definitely insurance is so important, particularly for people that have a mortgage, kids, or both of those things, or any type of liability. Say, for example, if you are a single income household or something like that, or you support other people in your life, it's really important to get your insurance checked up, and oftentimes that's best done through a professional. Now, you can keep the conversation going online. You can leave comments and that sort of a thing on the posts and videos. You can find out more at perla.com. Perla also offers a superannuation product as well, which has T's and C's and all those types of things, which you can check out at perla.com. Thank you to Perla for supporting this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast, of course. And so many good comments from everyone, from this, even from X. Like, we've got some good comments coming in. So please keep the conversation going. We'd love to see you again at next month's webinar. And if you're listening on podcast, we'll see you in the next episode. Gemma, an absolute pleasure. So thanks, as always, for joining me.
I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you. And bye for now, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Hump day is almost over. Let's cruise on into the weekend. Bye for now.